Thank you for staying with Bottom Line Africa. Now, Tuesday marked the last day for the American Chamber of Commerce Business Summit, geared towards boosting bilateral trade and investment between the East African bloc and the United States of America. The conference saw exchange of opportunities between the two business hubs. Also, the SME sector was encouraged to take advantage of partnership opportunities.
Kenya is open for business. That was the hallmark of the second edition of the American Chamber of Commerce Business Summit. The summit focused on building partnerships in both markets and fostering private sector involvement with a view to grow investments in Africa.
We have made significant strides in improving security, and we also thank the U.S. government here for being a true partner in this endeavor. We have also made significant investments in infrastructure, which has, in a significant way, reduced the cost of doing business. Since our summit last year, the Mombasa-Nairobi railway line has been extended to Suswa near the geothermal centers, and the site will soon be open, hopefully before the end of this year, for an industrial park. And again, we invite you to consider putting some of your investments in this particular park.
With over 200 companies such as Google, IBM and Coca-Cola at the forum, Kenya fronted to investors the numerous investment opportunities cutting across manufacturing to healthcare as viable sectors that investors can tap into.
My administration is seeking to create at least 6.5 million jobs over the next 5 years, so as to ensure that young Kenyans can secure and maintain good jobs. And we therefore, as I have done before, invite you to partner with us in driving the Big Four development agenda, under which huge investment opportunities exist as we work together in pushing our social economic development agenda forward. Some of these investments include agro-processing through key value chains, fisheries, horticulture, textiles and leather, as well as construction of affordable housing.
Other key areas that dominated talks at the summit was funding and empowering small and medium-sized businesses, which hold enormous potential for the Kenyan economy.
I call on you, ladies and gentlemen, to partner with our micro, small and medium enterprises, because once again, I am convinced that they will act as valuable partners with your businesses, fill in gaps in your supply chain, and provide support services that you require.
AMCHAM Business Summit 2019 focuses on the SME sector, which has endured a lot of hardships this year. Low credit supply due to red cap. At the same time, majority of them not surviving past 5 years. Hopefully, from the discussion of this particular conference, there will be a way out to build a robust system in the SME sector. Now, Kip Kimboy, KTN Business, Gigiri.
All right, now Kip Kimboy's report covering the last day of the American Chamber of Commerce Business Summit forms the topic of conversation today. We will take a look at the key outcomes from the summit and how not just Kenya but the East African community stands to gain from this partnership, the renewed partnership between the United States and the East African community. None other but Abi Agina, our business editor right here at KTN News, is here to at least shelve a little bit more light on this particular narrative. Now, Abi, it's nice to see you once again. I think we met in the office earlier on.
Correct.
But let's concentrate on the AMCHAM summit. In terms of the key outcomes that came out, we know the East African community has been in business with the United States through the AGOA, quote-unquote. But what new outcomes could actually, secure a path for better bilateral ties in terms of trade with the United States?
Well, Jesse, it's actually an interesting time for Africa. Right now, we are seeing a number of superpowers trying to flex their muscles and, of course, have a base in Africa. So the biggest key outcomes of this particular summit, Jesse, if you ask me, was the fact that the U.S. business community indicated that they'll be investing close to $400 million in Africa. And this will be, of course, in different sectors, ranging from manufacturing, ICT, universal healthcare. But there's a very increasing focus on the small, medium-sized business businesses. And this, of course, Jesse, both you and I know that Kenyans are very entrepreneurial. And of course, even in East Africa, if you go to Uganda, you go to Sudan, you go to Ethiopia, the entrepreneurship spirit is quite alive. So they want to really tap into this niche. And this comes in light of also the Africa Growth Opportunity Act, that is the AGOA, which is keen on the textile industry, which the Americans have had many years of partnership with Africa. Of course, the AGOA is closely coming to an end, but they're looking at which other sectors can we invest money in, especially now that there's a lot of hype that Africa is rising. African countries are putting up the right infrastructure. There's a growing population. There's demand for goods for the big American companies, from the tech companies, the Googles, the Ubers, IBM, name them, Jesse.
Silicon Valley.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but definitely, as well as, you know, those key areas of interest, textile, bearing in mind AGOA, what other key areas of interest right now might we be looking at in terms of, you know, when it comes to my mind, the Big Four agenda, might this be an area of opportunity for, you know, business from both the United States and East Africa as well?
Very pertinent question, Jesse. The Big Four will be a key plank for the Americas. And of course, they really want to go big, especially on industrialization. One of the companies that has expressed immense interest in East Africa, that is General Electric, which is a company that is in, of course, healthcare service provision in terms of putting up equipment. But when you look at the Big Four, the American companies are also keen on affordable housing. We had one of the key participants at the summit, that is the CEO for Tatu City, which is one of the most grand projects that East Africa will be looking at in terms of housing, urban node for housing. So the key areas, Jesse, for the Americans right now is also on housing. You do know that, for example, in Africa, quite a good number of our population are living in informal settlements. Over 20% of the urban population is living in these informal settlements. By this, we mean the slums. So if you look at affordable housing, that's an area that they're keen on. They will be looking at venturing into the counties and supporting the urban population, which continues to suffer under very diminished kind of housing products in the market. Right now, we are looking at an annual deficit of about 200,000 units. Jesse, so many young guys graduating from universities want to come work in the big cities, but is there affordable housing? So this is an area that the partnerships will be looking towards bringing to the forefront. And it's not just Kenya alone. The housing dilemma hits quite a number of the East African countries. Of course, Rwanda is also making some major strides, as well as South Africa.
All right, now, as we conclude, the importance of SMEs, as you highlighted earlier, cannot be, you know, overlooked. It contributes quite substantially to Kenya's GDP, and I'm sure that applies to the other East African communities as well. In terms of partnerships, what areas of focus will actually be looked into in order to ensure that, you know, the robust SMEs in the country are, you know, rejuvenated to ensure that better output is brought not just to the GDP, but, you know, to the general lives of the common Mwananchi?
Jesse, this question is very timely because the SMEs, as you know, are the engines of growth for any vibrant economy.
Yes.
And let me just walk you through some quick numbers here, Jesse. For example, in Kenya, we are talking about exports alone that came across the various sectors, including the SMEs. The exports in 2018 stood at $646 million US. And when you contrast this to what we exported to the US, it comes to half that number. That's about $315 million US. So you can see there's a very huge gap. And one of the areas that the AMCHAM delegations that were present at the UN, one of the areas that they discussed was on agri-tech. How can they partner with young innovators, especially who are coming up with very solution-oriented kind of mobile applications? For example, we know that there is a company that will be signing some partnerships to do soil testing using drone technology, where farmers don't need to pick a soil sample, drive all the way to the biggest town to have the soil tested. There's, of course, technology around supporting SMEs in the value chain. For example, we know of a company known as Trigger Foods, which also signed some interesting partnerships with Goldman Sachs, which is one of the big companies in the US, which will be digitizing. And of course, Trigger Foods is in the business of getting bananas from farmers, ripening them, then selling them to the market. But they don't have all this data within them. So some of the areas will be around agri-tech for the SMEs. At the same time, they're also looking at supporting SMEs when it comes to linkages, business-to-business linkages. For instance, there are many SMEs in Kenya who are doing handicrafts. There are some who are doing paintings, which can do pretty well in the developed markets. So all this comes at a time when there is that push that we need to move from aid to